Hey guys, so as usual, I wanted to bring a tier list of the best hand traps and staples using Dueling Book data from YGO as well as YCS topping information from the 250th YCS. And so apologies in advance, I'm a bit sick today, so I'm going to sound a little bit weird. But anyways, if you wanted to know how the tier scores are calculated, you can always check my older videos that I'll link down below. And as always, big thanks to my sponsors, links and discount codes in the description below for Yu-Gi-Oh supplies. So starting off the hand trap and staple tier list for this month, we are of course starting with Ash Blossom. Now, it's obviously really strong against something like Branded and Labyrinth, but those two decks are actually decks that are on the decline lately in the past month, so maybe not as impactful as it was even like a couple of months ago, but still, it's generic enough and it can hit pretty much every deck, right? I mean, Ash against Gigantic Sprite has always been quite nice. I guess against the Churia, Mole Cricket, Ash, pretty nice combo. And also I guess maybe, you know, against Kashira it's a little bit iffy. I think, you know, for example, especially if they already have Unicorn up and you Ash, then you're gonna get an extra deck card ripped, and so is that worth it? I'm not sure. It's up to you and also your deck, but nonetheless it's still very generic enough, and I think it's warranted in this very top spot. And then we actually have Infinite Impermanence. I think this also partly has to do with the fact that, you know, something like Labyrinth or Trap Tricks, which were initially seeing a ton of play, and Imperm was not that great against that deck. So it was a bit lower when I did this tier list last month, but now it's back up and being one of the top cards again. And so, you know, again, most decks Imperm can be useful. It's something is similar to Ash. It can always hit pretty much any deck, and it's also nice to have that column negation effect, which can be really handy in a format where, let's say, you have some kind of floodgate like Grave of the Super Ancient Organism that can completely shut down certain decks, and so it's always nice to have. It's good going first and second, and so I think it's also warranted in this tier A spot. Moving on to, we have Feather Duster, again a really strong card, and actually at the 250th YCS when I broke down the most played hand traps and staples, at least among the topping lists that were publicly available, Feather Duster was actually the most played staple. So it's, you know, really generic. There's no drawbacks to playing this card, so I think a lot of people are running it. Now the back row heavy decks are not as prevalent as it once was a couple of months ago, but still it has a lot of useful applications, especially something like, let's say, Kashtira. You know, getting rid of Rebirth on its own is still a really nice thing to do, and so I think against a lot of decks it still has a lot of applications. We have Droll and Lockbird, which has really been climbing up and up lately, and now it's really in this A tier, and I think it's warranted. I think against, let's say, any kind of runic variant Droll is can be pretty strong. Of course, they can do a lot of things in the draw phase to play around Droll, but still it will impact them. And I think especially next format, post Cyberstorm access, especially a deck like Super Heavy Samurai that's gonna draw a lot, or rather search a lot, I think this Droll is gonna be a mainstay in most people's decks next format. And then we have Nibiru, which is kind of interesting because I didn't think it would actually get categorized this high, but you know what, it keeps flipping back and forth. That's always how it's been with Nibiru. You know, people play around Nibiru and then it starts falling out of favor, and then now people don't respect Nibiru and then it starts being good again. So you know what, I'm not sure what to say. It really depends on the time of the month that you do the analysis, I would say. Next we have Dark Ruler, which is interesting because when I did this tier list a month ago, Dark Ruler was seeing almost no play, and it didn't even make this tier list because it just didn't warrant enough in terms of play on Dueling Book to get categorized among the top 25 staples played. But now, after, you know, YCS 250th with Sprite being so dominant again, people are giving that deck the respect that it always deserved, I would say. And Dark Ruler is always very strong against Sprite. Of course, they have some back row, let's say, you know, something like Smashers or Double Cross can still help you play a little around Dark Ruler, and they usually have some hand traps, but still, you can't really deny that it's good against Sprite. And again, against, let's say, like against the Nat Beast, it's always nice to have. Against Kashira, especially if they're, while it won't stop the zone locking, but you know what, if they're just going a Rise Hard Pass, Dark Ruler is still very good against them. And then we have Evenly Matched. Personally, I think this still deserves a spot, but you know what, surprisingly, in that 250th YCS when I broke down the most played hand traps and staples, it actually fell a lot compared to the month prior, but still I think it's a great card against, let's just say, against something like Branded. You usually won't be able to evenly them anymore because of the expulsion, if that goes through at least, because now you control a monster. And I guess maybe it's similar to that vein, you know, if we did see Ibli see a bit more play this time around, and you know, if you have Ibli, again, you can't evenly. So I guess there are some ways to try to stop the opponent from using the evenly, but if it can resolve, it's usually really strong, the best board wipe card out there. And then we have Cosmic Cyclone, which has also been seeing a lot of play lately, and I think is going to continue as long as the runic variants are in full force and they're not hit on the ban list. Of course, that Hugin protection is why that Cosmic Cyclone is really needed, because otherwise, you just can't get rid of that Fountain, and Fountain is really, really strong, generates a lot of resources, and allows them to continue to interact on your turn from the hand and playing those runic spells. So really, really strong right now. I'm actually kind of interested whether they'll ever make kind of like a double or like Twin Twister version of Cosmic Cyclone where you can like banish 2 cards. Of course, the cost has to be steeper, but I'm sure we'll probably see something similar in the future. And then we have Ghost Spell, which was a little bit interesting that it got ranked as high this time around. Obviously, against Branded, it can be really clutch to stop that Gimmick Puppet lock play. But if you are able to try to banish that Gimmick Puppet and also another monster that you can summon that's also banished, if both targets are banished, you actually cannot Ghost Spell Expulsion. So that's one way to play around it. But against, I guess, something like Math Mech, Ghost Spell has always been pretty nice as well to stop that multifactorial, because that is an insane trap. And it's kind of similar to the theme of back when Tri-Brigade was tier 1, for example, and Revolt. Ghost Spell was really clutch, although at that point they did have Appaloosa a lot of the cases. But you know what, still a pretty decent hand trap. I guess you can also stop like Runic Fountain for like a turn, but maybe not that impactful in that case, but still a good card. And then we have Gamma, which of course is another strong hand trap, and especially in Sprite seeing a lot of play, because with a combination of E-Telly can act as that pseudo Sprite starter and get you the Sprite combos. But also something, a deck like Labyrinth, again, I get it, it's not seeing as much play now, but usually when they activate Welcome Labyrinth, it's gonna get ashed, and they usually don't control monsters, so they can Gamma pretty easily there too. So it's a really, really strong one, and it's usually very, very impactful. And then we have talents still around in this format. So, in a format where there's a lot of hand traps being played, such as decks like Sprite, Kashira, and Math Mech, they're going to be able to fit a lot of hand traps. And so you might get punished if you do, but sometimes you have no choice but to try to hand trap your opponent. And talents, especially in combination with Thrust, where you have easy access to it going second, it's a really, really crazy strong card and can really sway the momentum of the game. And then we have Dimension Shifter. This has actually gone up quite a bit since the last month I did it, and 60% match win percentage. I usually like to not emphasize the win percentage when it comes to these card specific analysis, just because it's a little bit not as straightforward as it looks, because it's just the win percentage in that total match if this card was played in any of those 2 or 3 games. So it's not really specific to the card, but a card like Dimension Shifter, I would say might be a little bit more applicable, where the win percentage actually might have some meaning to it, because it is a very high impact card, and against the right deck, or more so against the wrong decks, I guess, Shifter can really, really kill them. So you know what, in a format where you're seeing a lot of Rise and play in something like Math Mech or even like Rika, for example, Shifter is really, really strong against them, and something that can just skip their turn. And then we have Call by the Grave. This has actually not been seeing too much play the last few months, but now it's a bit higher again. I mean, I guess, with the hand trap like something like Droll or Shifter that are just turn ending and they're seeing more play, certainly nice to have Call by to try to at least have a chance to play that turn. Onto the C tier, we do have Book of Moon. I guess this is the more popular book now compared to Book of Eclipse. Of course, that card is still seeing play and is also decently strong, but Book of Moon is also kind of nice because you can just do it on your own monster and just try to dodge that Imperm or Veiler. Let's say you like normal summon Luber and just get that Brand Infusion, even though they're trying to negate that effect. So, you know what? It's pretty handy. It's a pretty old card, and it's kind of cool to see that it still has relevance right now. And then we have D-Barrier, which has been falling and falling and falling the last few months. Obviously, we see a lot of decline in Labyrinth, which means it also brings down the play of Dimensional Barrier, because they're probably main decking this card. I think it's still a bit of a toxic card, though. I know it's not seeing that much play right now, but at any point in the future formats too, this is going to come up again if it's not banned. So I do hope that it will still get addressed, but you know what? I'm certainly okay if some of you think that it should still stay. And then we have Book of Eclipse, similar to Book of Moon. Obviously, at the beginning of this format, with Kashir being the best deck, it saw a ton of play in most people's deck lists, but I think nowadays, people have sort of gone away from it and just focusing on just Book of Moon, for example. You just really need to book that like Arise Heart, or maybe Shangri-La rather. So you know what, it still has some applications, but your opponent can draw a lot of cards off of it. It can also be stopped by Ash, which is seeing a lot of play, obviously, so maybe not as good as it was at the beginning of the format, or at least not as needed, but you know what, still decent nonetheless. And then we have Lightning Storm, which is, I guess I would say, solid. I mean, for the most part, this card has always been used for its back removal potential rather than the monster clearance, and I think especially now that's more clear because, for example, a deck like a Sheer or like Sprite, usually their monsters are in defense mode, so you're not really clearing monsters with this card anymore, but with back row, it's always nice to have. And then we have Gamma Seal, and I mean, this is specific to Gamma Seal, but in general, Kaijus I've seen a lot more play, and especially something like Santa Claus, which has the lowest attack among the Kaiju-like kind of monsters, at least I believe, and so that can play around the Newman lock, which restricts you from specialing 1800 or higher attack monsters. So I think Kaiju still have a place in this game. It's probably going to see a good amount of play as well next format with Super Heavy Samurai, although at that point maybe they're just going to play Sphere Mode or Lava Golem, but still really nice to have. And then we have Effect Failure, which not seeing as much play as Imperm. I think honestly, probably for the most part, this card is being seen mostly in like Math Mech lists, and that's bringing the numbers up because this serves as a good bridge for Small World as well, aside from being a pretty decent and strong hand trap. And then we have Thrust, of course, not nearly as popular as Talents, and perhaps it's just this format. Maybe in a future format, this card will see a lot more play. We have seen Talents also drop a lot in play throughout its time since release, so you can never count them out. I think it's still a really strong card, and it kind of makes going second decks a little bit more viable as well. And then we have Solemn Judgment, which I guess is, as a going first side option, is probably the most generic of them all and really strong and a safe choice to have as well. Usually you see more of this in like back row heavy decks, but you know what? Something like, let's say, Sprite, you do see a decent amount of Sprite deck lists main decking this. You do want to stop that Dark Ruler, and you could also use Anti-Spell as well, but that could also get blown by Cosmic Cyclone, which is seeing a lot of play nowadays. And Solemn Judgment, Counter Trap, there's no red reboot anymore, so you're probably safe to be able to resolve this. And then we also have Bestial Magma. We're seeing a bit more play in Bestials again, I'm noticing. Still not nearly as much, of course, as last format with Tears. But I think, especially against something like Branded and stopping that Gimmick Puppet lock, these cards are just so crazy good. Of course, again, if you try to banish that Gimmick Puppet so that you can't get Bestial in the first place, that's probably the way to go. But still, definitely respect the Bestials. It's going to catch you by surprise if not. And then finally, we have some more Bestials in the D tier. Druid's Worm, pretty nice, has always been good for its send effect, especially when you just like link it off and you can just send a monster for free. But of course, not nearly seeing as much play as last format, but still decent, especially if you're playing Manamut, then you're probably playing Druid's Worm as well. We do have Serenir technically, but I think this is more so, it is a main deck staple for branded deck lists in general because it can foolish that branded spell or trap, so not really as generic, I would say, as Magma Nut or Druid's Worm, but still pretty decent. And then finally, we have Lava Golem, which has been seeing a lot of decline in play, especially, at least at the beginning of the format, we were seeing a lot of Lava Golem, but I guess, like, people were playing something like, Ibli, or now with the Newman lock, it gets harder and harder to play something like Lava Golem with a high attack. But, who knows, maybe next format, it will still have a bit more relevance, too, against Super Heavy Samurai, but I think it's pretty decent. But Sphere Mode probably would be better next format, and right now Kaijus are probably better as well. So anyways, that was it for the hand trap and staple tier list by the data video. Hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully that was useful in terms of helping me prepare for any tournaments in the next couple of weeks before Cyberstorm Axis drops. Really excited to see how the format will shape after that set releases, and so a big thanks to all my patrons as always for your support. Really appreciate it, and also thank you to everyone for watching the video, and well, take care guys.